Greetings, finders of both paths and stars. Welcome to our first video in Drift Lanes to Distant Worlds. The system has 14 different places for us to go, and we've got to start somewhere, so we might as well begin with Golarion, the planet we've already seen a bunch of times in the Pathfinder timeline. It'll be neat to see all the interesting developments that the cultures of the world have gone through in the centuries that passed during the gap, and it's gone. Yep, Golarion isn't there in the future. Something has whisked the planet away to a hiding place so secret that nothing can find it. Not even the gods seem to know. If any of them have the planet's location, they are keeping that very well guarded. Since the disappearance occurred during the gap, there's no real record of when it vanished, why it vanished, or how it vanished. All we know is that in its place was Absalom Station, a gigantic space station built around the mythical Starstone, which powers the whole thing. The origins of the station are just as lost to the gap as knowledge of Golarion's fate, though we do have a few clues to work with. We'll go over those in the Starfinder section, but before we do, we have a Pathfinder part to talk about. Distant Worlds of the Past, Golarion, the Cage. Okay, but isn't that just the rest of the channel? Golarion is the main setting for Pathfinder. Talking about the people and places on that planet is what I've already made a bunch of videos about and will make a bunch more about in the future. What's the point of this section? Good question, Hypotheticus, Lord of Asking Stuff That I Need Asked. The answer actually lies in the book I'm pulling a lot of this information from, Distant Worlds. As a personal anecdote, that book is one that really made me fall in love with the Pathfinder setting, by seeing just how many fun and amazing things existed in the setting for me to explore as a player and play with as a game master. So revisiting it for this project is a fun treat for me. Anyway, that book obviously doesn't say much about Golarion either, since it's focused on the other planets in the system. But it does talk about Golarion's fun little floating space buddy, the Moon. And that's what we're going to talk about here, Pathfinders. You get to learn about the big silver ball that lights up the sky at night. Isn't that wonderful? But Dina, the moon is boring. It's just a big rock that sits there. You fool! You absolute rube. Yeah, Earth's moon is just a big rock full of dust and astronaut golf balls, but this is a world of fantasy and magic. This moon has a magical secret prison and a succubus-infested jungle on it. Yeah, now I've got your attention, so let's zoom in on that moon and see what's up there. Now, similar to the real world, the moon of Golarion is just kind of known as the moon. I'm reminded of a meme I saw once about how the difference between fantasy and sci-fi is that in fantasy the Earth is called like Gaia, and in sci-fi it's called Terra. Kinda feels like something very similar. In sci-fi it's the moon, and in fantasy it's like Luna or something. Now the Aslanti actually did have a different name for it, calling the moon Somal. And in Somal, the Aslanti saw an incredibly untapped resource. They had the magic to travel the stars, why not put that rock to some use? So they built a prison. An important note before we continue is that Golarion's moon is tidally locked. This means that its rotation on its axis matches the rate of its rotation around an object, in this case, the planet. What that means is that only one side of the moon ever faces the planet and reflects the light from the sun, so it's the only part of it visible from the surface. The opposite side is never lit, and thus the dark side. Actually, fun fact about the real world, most close-orbiting moons to planets are locked like this due to gravitational forces, which I think is kind of neat. It's also possible for an entire planet to become tidally locked, which you'll want to keep in mind for later. But back to the Aslanti, their transportation and protective magics allowed them to explore the dark side of the moon and build an entire prison complex called the City of the Faceless. Some of the Empire's enemies and dissidents held expertise or knowledge that could prove useful in the future, but were too dangerous to be held in one of the Aslanti's other secret hidden prisons. They had a lot of those. So they pulled a Celestia and sent those banana-loving bitches to the moon. While on the moon, the prisoners were tasked with maintaining their moon prison, which kept its atmosphere and livable temperature with magic, as well as exploring another interesting facet of Somal, its tunnels. See, the thing about tunnels is they don't just appear, something has to make them. And on a normal, habitable planet, it's usually water carving through rock over thousands of years to create caves and tunnel systems. Now, moons are not known for their abundance of water, and if you're asking about those jungles I mentioned, those actually come later, so don't worry about it for now. Without water to naturally carve these tunnels out, there's only one other explanation left. Something else made them. Exactly what might have done this, we don't know. A possible explanation is that the vault builders that carved out the Darklands on Golarion had a few lesser projects on the moon, but there isn't any evidence of something as large as a vault of Orv beneath the surface. Another possibility is that a giant worm did it. The kaiju Yarthun the Moon Grub lairs somewhere on the moon's surface, largely undisturbed beneath a self-created layer of ice. It will occasionally wake up and travel down to the planet to do kaiju stuff, don't worry about it. A few times this has happened, Yarthun was seen being killed, only to be seen again slumbering on the moon. So the theory goes that the interior of the moon is full of little larval forms of Yarthun, and when its larger form dies, a new one ascends to the position of Big Moonbug. Or it could be something else, no one really knows. The Aslanti prisoners of the Faceless City either haven't found anything of note down there, or have kept very quiet about what they did find. The prisoners were cut off from Golarion when Earthfall happened, and since Aslant exploded afterwards, there's obviously no new prisoners coming in. The people who remained managed to create their own isolated society inside their prison-turned-home, which actually remains to this day. They've managed to avoid the various implications of a limited-sized society with the help of the other civilization on the moon. Now, the Aslanti are also responsible for this part. They attempted to terraform the entire moon using magic to better make use of it for, more secret prisons and, Aslanti vacation homes. Exactly how they did this, we aren't sure. But based on the results, they likely attempted to kind of magically transplant some aspect of another plane onto the moon. But something went wrong along the way, resulting in several patches of dense abyssal jungle dotting the southern surface of the moon. Called the Moonscar, this place is home to a large group of beautiful warrior women. Each of these women are sisters, birthed by the undisputed leader of this region. Ismiara, the Insatiable Queen, is a powerful succubus and servant of Nocticula, ruler of the Midnight Isles of the Outer Rifts. While many demons would be quite content to just rule the Moonscar, Ismiara has other ideas. She periodically sends her daughters down to Golarion to kidnap powerful people, who are brought back to the moon for her, let's say, personal uses. This is a very slow-going process, since the succubus and her children don't actually have a fast way to get between the planet and the moon. Teleportation magic isn't strong enough to move between planets, so they're left to just fly out into space towards the planet and let momentum drift them down towards Golarion, using their flight to slow down in the atmosphere. Let's do some quick math here, using the Earth and our own moon as a substitute because they're functionally interchangeable for this. The two seem incredibly close, and on a galactic scale they are, but in a human sense they are impossibly far apart. That distance isn't consistent, but on average it's about 238,855 miles away from the Earth. That's about 30 times the diameter of the entire planet, which means you could put, multiple Earths between us and the moon, and they would fit, which I kind of knew scientifically, but actually looking it up for this kind of still blew my mind a bit. Anyway, converting that into feet, because that's the Pathfinder movement system, that's 1.261 billion feet. The succubi can fly at a speed of 120 feet every 6 seconds. That's 12,000 feet a minute. If I did my math right, and I could have failed on this, that's a trip time of 1,050,962 minutes. Dividing by the number of minutes in a day, we can get a trip of 729.83 days, or just a hair under 2 years. One way. So they have to fly for 2 years, grab a guy, and then fly that person back to the moon, using magic to keep the vacuum and cold of space from killing that person. The ancient Aslanti had portals that allowed for much faster travel, but Earthfall has buried those and none have reactivated since. These prisoners and the women that obtained them have served as a source of new blood and companionship for the City of the Faceless, which has kept their population from declining too far once the Succubus Queen is done with them. The last thing to touch on with Golarion's moon is more of a rumor than anything else. Historical or religious scholars might know that during Aslan's time, there was a goddess of the moon that they worshipped, Hakavna. When the Starstone was hurled at the planet, she saved much of it by blocking a meteor with the moon, an act that killed her. It didn't stop the whole Starstone, but it did slow it down and shatter the original meteor, with fragments raining down and destroying Aslant. But not every fragment. Since it hit the moon, there might still be some of them up there. And many believe that part of what gives the Starstone its incredible power to elevate someone to godhood is the presence of another god's blood on the rock. Blood that might still be on these fragments buried in the moon. If someone could find one of those and take it for themselves, they'd have their own personal god rock. Though searching the entire moon for a rock is, well, good luck with that one. That's all I'll tell you. Make sure you've got the right one, too, because I'm not sure snorting moon rock dust is gonna make you a god, though it might make you feel like one very briefly. So moons in fantasy are always a little more than just a moon, be it a different color, or there's more of them, or something else weird. Making it more than just a rock happens quite often. I think the Golarion moon does strike a good balance here. There are large parts that are just barren rock, but small pockets of interesting create a unique high-level destination for a party looking for a bit of an out-of-this-world experience. There is, in fact, even a whole adventure set here, the Moonscar, which takes place, well, if you can't guess, see me after class for some remedial lessons. Overall, the moon is a fun little addition to the system Golarion calls home, and in the future, it's gone. Drift Lanes of the Future, Golarion, the Lost. So moons and planets are kind of a package deal, so when Golarion was whisked away, so was the moon. Since we can't cover it anymore, we're going to pivot to talking about Absalom Station. Because construction happened during the Gap, no one knows who built the station or why they did it. The physical state of the station when the Gap ended does provide some clues we can use to get some information. Based on the construction, we can guess it was built over time by mortals, rather than kind of conjured from thin air by a god or incredibly powerful being. Not that they can't have helped, but they weren't the main construction person. There's also evidence that the station had been inhabited for a while before the Gap ended. This raises further questions about the origins of Absalom Station. Was it intentionally built as a refuge for the people of Golarion, built by a civilization that knew their planet was going to be taken away? Or did it start life as an ambitious but otherwise mundane space station, only to end up as humanity's lifeboat when Golarion disappeared? While we may never truly know, Absalom Station ironically just might hold the answer. The Gap didn't just affect memory, it also muddled and corrupted the physical and digital historical records. That's why we can't just pick up a history book and look at what happened during the Gap. They are all kind of wonky. But while direct records are unreliable at best, there are still clues left behind. Like I said, there's evidence of Absalom Station being in use for a long time before the Gap ended. You can look at the wear on a part that wouldn't be replaced very often, compare that to the average rate that kind of wear would normally happen, and determine that this machine must have been at least so old to have worn down this far. It's kind of like figuring out if you took your medication for the day by counting the number of pills left in the bottle, but scaled up. For the few years between the end of the Gap and the advent of drift travel, the station was a place of chaos and infighting. The ancestries on the station were almost exclusively drawn from Lost Golarion, and the Gap's interruption of identity and culture inside a closed system created a pressure cooker full of tension that easily spilled out into open warfare. The tipping point occurred when a series of malfunctions started cascading into a failure that nearly vented the entire station's atmosphere out into space. And I'm not a scientist, but I'm pretty sure most of us need that to breathe? In the face of this crisis, the people of Absalom Station united together, forming the basis of their current government, the Syndis Guild and the Prime Executive, often shortened to the Primex. Slowly, the residents of the station were able to get back on their feet. That gave them time and space to truly contemplate their situation. Many of the ancestries of Lost Golarion were now homeless. The elves could return to Castrovel, and many did, while the dwarves built massive Sky Citadel ships to mimic the conditions of their Sky Citadels on Golarion. Humanity, though, clung to the station as a lifeline. Many of them used the station's records of Golarion to try and rebuild some semblance of their original culture. They didn't have proper context for this, and the Gap messed up records to the point that any ancestral connections were conjecture at best, so a lot of this is... It's kind of like Hercules the Legendary Journey version of accurate, where it kind of is, except for all the parts where it's not. Still, an attempt was made. Drift travel changed everything, and to explain why, we have to talk about the power source for Absalom Station. The entire structure benefits from free, functionally limitless energy generated by its core. Said core is no ordinary piece of magic or technology. Deep inside the station is the Starstone, the mythical artifact that ascended any who touched it to godhood back on Lost Golarion. Previously residing inside the Cathedral of the Starstone on Absalom Isle, it was now inaccessible at the core of the station. Only people with the highest possible clearance and trust of the station's government are allowed to get close to it. Locked heavy blast doors seal the only entrances to the Starstone's chamber, and those can't be opened even if the current Primex wanted to, because the code to do so was lost during the Gap and no one knows the password reset email. Attempting to approach by other methods, like magic, triggers the station's automated defenses and results in a very dead intruder. Still, Absalom Station maintains a Starstone guard to keep the reactor safe, since it's needed to keep the station operational, and to guide the universe to Absalom Station. See, the Starstone reactor also functions as a drift beacon, an incredibly powerful one. Normal drift beacons provide a waypoint for navigation between points in space, but also assist in the speed of travel between points using the drift. For our purposes, think of this kind of like a pull from the destination helping speed along the journey. A large cluster of drift beacons in a location can increase this pull, allowing a traveler to get to their destination faster. For some unknown reason, the Starstone reactor works as a super powerful mega cluster of drift beacons, allowing for incredibly fast return trips from almost anywhere in the galaxy, even if a travel that distance would normally take months. No one is quite sure why it works like this, since the Starstone reactor's creation predates the drift. Literally, it's older than the entire alternate dimension. Perhaps the creator of the drift, the god Triune, added this effect to the plane when they made it for some reason? No one's quite sure. Doesn't really matter why it works like that, all that really matters is that it does work like that. No matter where you go in the galaxy, you're only a week or so away from home. That's a powerful tool to have at your disposal, and whoever controls Absalom Station controls that power. Which is why it was only 4 years after the advent of drift travel that the planet Eox launched an attack on the station. They were rebuffed by Absalom Station's powerful defenses, thankfully, and none of the other worlds in the system attempted to take the station since. Part of the reason for that is the Veskarium knocking on the system's door just a few years later, asking if they could take over and rule with an iron fist now, please? First contact happened about 12 years after the gap started, and it would be 24 years after that before the Veskarium ramped up their aggression in earnest. In 36 AG, they attacked the planet Triaxis in what's known as the Battle of Elydra, kicking off the Silent War. 5 years later, all the worlds in the system came together in their own mutual defense. The initial pact was proposed by a coalition of officials from Absalom, Castrovel, and Versus, and the first planet to sign on was surprisingly Eox. While not everyone in charge of that world agreed with the decision, and we'll cover more about that in their own video, the agreement of the most notably hostile planet in the system caused everyone else to quickly follow suit as they realized how dire the situation was if Eox was agreeing to it. All of the worlds within the Pact maintain their own sovereign governments, with Absalom Station acting as a hub for Pact world activity, but otherwise just another member. Certain rights are guaranteed to all sentient beings across the Pact worlds, and a citizen of any member world is considered a citizen of the Pact worlds as a whole, in addition to their native planet. The original Pact members include Absalom Station and all of the planets in the system except the gas giant Liavara, which is only a protectorate overseen by its neighbor Brithida for reasons that will be clear when we talk about those two planets. Instead, two of Liavara's inhabited moons themselves enjoyed full Pact world status. New arrivals who immigrated in could become citizens of the Pact worlds as a whole, as well as citizens of wherever they settled through the local government's various processes. This was the case when the Shirin arrived in 83 AG, and more notably, the arrival of the Kasatha in 240 AG presented an entirely new possibility. Their world ship, the Adari, had its own government that wished to remain sovereign, but also be a part of the system they now called home. In 277, they gained Pact world status, being the first new member added to the system. In 291, the Pact worlds and the Veskarium ended their war as the Swarm arrived, presenting a greater threat to both of them. This mirrored the formation of the Pact worlds, a fact that's not lost on a lot of people. When the Swarm was beaten back, a tentative peace remained between the two galactic powers that holds to this day, though the Veskarium's warmongering means that a possible breakdown is never completely off the table. This war also resulted in the only pseudo-member self-governing entity that exists as part of the Pact worlds. The hyper-capitalist Aspis Consortium helped to bridge the gap between the two forces and donated many weapons to the cause. Their contribution against the Swarm convinced the Pact Council to provide the Consortium with a special status. They aren't a full voting member of the Pact, but they are considered a self-governing entity by the Pact worlds, which grants them diplomatic status and diplomatic immunity in several key areas. This is actually a bit of an issue, because the Aspis Consortium is the worst conglomeration of scum and villainy to ever call itself a legitimate business. But this status does mean that the Consortium spends a lot of effort keeping themselves presentable within the Pact worlds, though outside it's a much different case. The final changes to the Absalom Pact have all occurred in the last few years. In 323, the Diaspora and 3 of Brithida's moons gained full Pact world status, while in 324 the planet Octurne lost its status. We'll cover why in its own video. That one's a doozy. If you know, you know. The final edition came just this year, in 325, when the first world completely outside the Pact world's original system applied for membership status. One of the Veskarium's worlds, formerly Vesk 6, now Pulanus, is the newest addition to the Pact worlds. Welcome in, buddies. Helping to bridge the gap between the various worlds of the Pact are the Stewards, a peacekeeping and law enforcement organization that operates within the Pact worlds. Interplanetary issues and diplomatic incidents all fall under the Stewards' purview. The group originated on Versus, where it fulfilled the same basic function between each of the nations on that planet. Now they fulfill the same role within the entirety of the Pact worlds. The Pact is a huge part of Absalom Station's history, but the station itself is just another member of that Pact. So let's go ahead and take a look at the station itself, which hasn't changed much since whenever it was created. Though obviously not the size of a planet, the station is still massive, allowing for a population of over 2 million to exist comfortably. The central section of the station, the Eye, is a large dome. The transparent glass-like material allows for sunlight to enter, helping the abundant amount of parks and natural spaces flourish. Radiating outward from the central location are several protruding arms that contain the station's various space docks. Each of these arms are their own little district inside the station and serve their own unique purposes. Between the two is the Ring, which circles the Eye and acts as a residential area for the majority of the station's residents. Lastly, we have the Spike, the portion of the station that extends downward instead of out. Made up of the large industrial machines a station of this size needs to survive, the poorest and most outcast make their homes here, along with those hunting the station's most secret crannies and elusive ghost levels. The last part of the station, though, isn't actually part of the station. The docks can fit a lot of ships, but there will always be more people eager to do business on Absalom Station than there are docking stations to accommodate them. There are also quite a few benefits to just hanging around near the station, from access to news and trade to protection from hostile forces. This has created a huge swarm of ships that live around the station, forming the Armada. Since a ship floating in the Armada isn't technically on Absalom Station, they aren't subject to many of the laws, restrictions, and taxes the station places on ships docked there. Many of the station's black market deals take place out here, and security largely lets that slide. After all, if the best place for criminal activity is outside the station, it incentivizes the worst elements to keep things out there rather than in here. So let's take a quick look at some of the interesting places you can visit on Absalom Station, starting on the outside with the Armada and working our way inward. While the clusters of ships are ever shifting as people come and go, docking and decoupling as they need, there are a few more stable locations to visit. If you're after an interesting time, King Kernay's Casbah has almost anything you could want under the stars. A collection of large freighters and smaller ships permanently welded together to create a labyrinthine connection of rooms, the Casbah offers everything you'd want in gaming, recreational substances, and purchasable companionship. And if you find yourself a little light in the pocket from a small run of bad luck, King Kernay even has a loan service ready to extend you a line of credit. Just be careful about that, because rumor has it that all the ships the establishment is made of originally belonged to people who found themselves unable to pay back their loans. But hey, that's never going to happen to you, right? Yeah, definitely not. But the Armada isn't all drug dens and snuggle ships. There are a few who take the name of the place a little bit more literally. Valor's Heart is a gigantic warship maintained by the Church of Iomedae. It acts as a training school for their warrior priests, molding them into powerful holy combatants for the Crusader goddess. After the Gap, Iomedae is the only one of Golarion's ascended to maintain a large presence among the gods, and many see her as a representative of all that was lost in the bygone world. Her faithful train here, ready to defend the last remnant of her home and the artifact that ascended her to godhood in the first place. Valor's Heart isn't just a school, though. The ship is fully armed and operational and ready to jump to the station's defense at a moment's notice. Valor's Heart contrasts interestingly with another fixture of the Armada where people are raised and trained. Well, I say people, but I mean person. A person, every one of them. Simar Commune has an unknown number of residents, but they are all the same person. Simar, a human woman, controls the entire community of clones of herself. These clones vary in age from infants to the elderly, and no one knows how many of them there actually are. The Pact World laws around cloning are pretty strict when it comes to creating a fully functional adult copy of someone, but less so about cloning infinite babies of yourself. So that's what Simar has done, raising generations of hers. All have been trained extensively on genetic engineering, biohacking, and psychic energy manipulation. All known Simars are dedicated, controlled, and highly competent, making her one of the best operatives and assassins available for hire. If you see a Simar outside the commune, you best hope she's not here for you. Moving on to the station itself, we have the Arms. Containing most of the station's docks, the Arms are often a visitor's first impression of Absalom Station. What they'll find is a chaotic riot of cultures and species making their way through the station, eager to get home, get going, or do brisk business. All travelers need to pass through here, and many of them never bother to leave. This is especially true for the more alien visitors, who might not be the most at ease in the station's more generic halls built for humanoid species. What if your species is entirely aquatic in nature, or hails from a gas giant with a neon atmosphere, or comes from a cold planet that caused you to evolve into a sentient purple walrus? Try riding an escalator like that. This has led to some of the Arms developing a sort of specialized reputation. For example, the puddles are almost entirely flooded and perfectly suited for any aquatic species that find themselves doing business on Absalom Station. Some glass tubes run through the watery halls, giving land-walking and amphibious species a place to do business and transition from wet to dry. A similar situation can be found in Fogtown, a neighborhood whose atmosphere is full of thick, multicolored gases better suited to the inhabitants of gas giant planets. If you aren't from those kind of planets, well, these gases tend to be a different density than oxygen, so stick to the clear path and try to take shallow breaths. In the shadow of Fogtown is a neighborhood of the Arms that's more known for its cultural association rather than a species one. Little Akaton is a tiny but close-knit community built around a smaller docking arm. It's the kind of place where you can dock in peace if you're willing to pay a slightly higher processing fee, with the guards asking fewer questions as a result. Of course, they'll cut you a discount if you've got family here. But if you do stop in, head on over to Sunny Six's Diner, the brightest eating spot in Little Akaton. A similar situation, but on a much larger and more deliberate scale, can be found in the Vesk Quarter. This arm was deliberately set aside for the Vesk residents after the end of the Silent War, to give them a place of their own on the station to relieve tension and hopefully reduce violence. After all, the Silent War lasted over 200 years and only ended a few decades ago. Old resentments could easily flare up again, especially with the Veskarium still very hungry for a good fight. The Arms also have a few notable destinations for visitors to take a look at, or avoid as the case may be for our first one, as the strange site located at the end of Kavalas's Arm is the Far Dock. At what should be a prime docking space, there exists a strange twisting doorway guarded by 2 large stone automatons, each looking humanoid except for their heads, which look like a lion and a serpent. They guard this strange doorway covered in alien runes that light up and seem to almost manifest at random. Inside the door is a strange curtain of green energy. Anyone approaching within 20 feet is violently stopped by the guards, but if you can slip past them and enter the green doorway, it turns red and you're ejected violently in a spray of chunked up meat and blood. No one who's made it into the doorway has survived as far as we know. But you'll totally be the first, definitely. Do a flip when you go in, that is going to look so cool. Sliding to the left, we have the Eyes Wide Agency, a dubiously legal detective agency that uses a combination of actual clue gathering and detective work alongside definitely reliable psychic powers. Now, if more practical mystic powers are something you're after, head on up to the Cosmo Monastery of the Empty Orbit, where a Kasatha woman named Tabashat Asio Marcola runs one of the best Solarian training monasteries outside of the Adari. Ironically, her personal philosophy of the universe says that Absalom Station's very existence in place of Golarion has unbalanced the whole cosmos, and any student that comes out of her grueling training regimen tends to share her opinion. I find that kind of funny because she's a Kasatha, a species that also built a large-scale megastructure to escape a planet, but I guess it's fine when they do it, or maybe her position is more nuanced and I just don't know it yet. Lastly, you can relax at the Click Clack Club. C3 is your premier destination for everything in VR gaming, with an experience catering to the cybernetic and technologically enhanced. Not that fully organic customers are turned away, their creds spend just as good, but there's a lot less for them to enjoy. Moving into the ring, this is where much of the station's middle class resides, and many of the businesses and amenities they need to live are also located here. Nothing exemplifies the entrenched corporate power structure quite like Blue Rise Tower, where every level is owned lock, stock, and barrel by one megacorp or another. These business empires already enjoy a pretty hands-off treatment from the station's government, but in Blue Rise Tower, they are kings. Whoever owns the level you're on controls everything. Its proponents claim it's an anarcho-capitalist utopia. What I claim about it can't be put in a YouTube video, but involves a couple of cocktails from the Mall of Tov, if you catch my meaning. If you prefer spiritual fulfillment over monetary gain, head on over to the Congregation, where the temples of every major deity in the Pact Worlds can be found, as well as several minor deities and probably 1 or 2 churches that are just made up. But given how much reality can warp at a whim in Starfinder, they might have once previously been real at some point in the future. Maybe. Should you want to combine the vibes of the Congregation and Blue Rise Tower, you have the Golden Vault, the worst of both worlds! The head office of Abadar Corp, the religion of business that makes all business their business. Specializing in banking and security, but having their gold-dusted fingers in every pie they can find, Abadar Corp is the respectable, friendlier answer in high-powered corporate business. I have similar opinions on them as I do about the fat cats at Blue Rise Tower. Though not an official member of the Pact Council, Abadar Corp has a close working relationship with the leaders of Absalom Station, stemming from their important role in the station's early chaotic history and the formation of the Syndics Guild. That money and access can bring a lot of power on its own, no election needed. The Golden Vault overlooks the free markets, Absalom Station's bazaar. Everything from long-standing co-op storefronts to pop-up shops and stalls rigged out of old maintenance trucks can be found lining the alleys and halls here, selling anything and everything your heart could desire. At least when it comes to legally available wares. We're too close to station security to be dealing in anything too suspicious, head on out to the Armada for that. And it's not just wares, if you want labor, this place is full of people looking for work to make a few credits on the side. Plus, if you need protection, it's just a quick walk to the Security Resources Pavilion, where established mercs and up-and-comers alike congregate to compete for contracts. For travelers looking to make a home on Absalom Station, we have Drifter's End. Ambassadors and diplomats for newly contacted alien species can find a place to settle down and learn all they can about the Pact Worlds here. Meanwhire, the explorers, drifters, and frontier finders of the future use this place as a home base to come back to when they need a break from boldly going. The center of it all is the Lore Spire Complex, headquarters of the Starfinder Society. Modeled after the Pathfinder Society of Lost Golarion, the Starfinders follow the lead of the First Seeker, pursuing knowledge wherever it can be found. Sliding under the big bubble, we have the Eye, the innermost part of Absalom Station. Here, the wealthy and elite make their home and work to keep Absalom running in the face of the chaos of the Pact Worlds and the galaxy as a whole. The Eye puts its best foot forward with the lush beauty of Jatembe Park, named for the great mage from Golarion's ancient past. Open to every citizen of the station, the park is carefully tended by Xeno Wardens to be lush and green all year round. Encircling it is the Parkside District, home to most of Absalom Station's governmental buildings, all overlooked by the Capitol building, Planara. Fitting its central position on the station, the Eye is the central hub for many things in the Pact Worlds. The Steward headquarters, Bastion, trains the next generation of Pact World defenders and peacekeepers. While the Arcanumerium teaches magic, science, scientific magic, and, most importantly, magical science. The arts are covered by the Hamasphere Theatorium, which hosts everything from traditional theater to zero-gravity stadium raves. Our final location in the eye is the Swordlight Cathedral, a large temple to Iomedae. The main building looks like an ancient cathedral transplanted into the future, soaring stone columns and statues giving it a vibe almost out of time. Though the stained glass windows actually being holograms do give the game away. The deeper rooms of the church are more modern, to support the visiting priests and crusaders who come to this sacred place. The location of prominence for her temple really sells how much Iomedae has become the goddess of Golarion's remnants, both the station and her children. Now that we've gone all the way in, we have nowhere else to go but down. Down into the spike. The people living down here are the station's poorest and most destitute, who can't afford to exist in the proper residential areas. They instead make their home among the engineering tubes and crawl spaces deep in the station's bowels. Far outside the protection of station security, the spike hides many dangers, some mundane and some very much not. The biggest of these dangers isn't obvious. In fact, it's insidiously simple to run into. Any twist or turn of the passages down here could lead you into the ghost levels. A winding maze of weird rooms that are only really kind of there. They exist just a half step to the left of the rest of reality, flickering on and off like a neon light and hiding predators this reality was never meant to see. But where there's danger, there's opportunity, and many brave and foolhardy station residents intentionally hunt the ghost levels, eager to find what lies below. And probably make a podcast out of it. It's not all ethereal backrooms and side passages, though. The Spike has its own pseudo-government centered around the Rig House. A huge building made of more interconnected rooms than most people can count, the Lowrigger gang keeps the place neutral territory, letting anyone in the Spire come and find work, deal information, find a place to crash, or just party for a bit. If you have a problem in the Spike, you don't take it to station security, you go to the Rig House. Somewhere down in the Spike, hidden behind more security than possibly anything else in the entire universe, is the Starstone Reactor. How to get there is closely guarded information, and no one can get to the stone's actual chamber. The rock's ability to both power the station for free and work as a hyperdrift beacon means that everyone on Absalom Station has a vested interest in protecting that thing. As without it, Absalom Station would slip from the central jewel of the Pact Worlds back into an obscure backwater home for Golarion's few remaining children. Absalom Station's unique property as a drift beacon ensures it will always be the center of attention in the universe. Though it orbits at the literal heart of the mystery of Lost Golarion, the station has forged its own identity as a galactic hub and melting pot for the Pact Worlds, and the universe as a whole. Anyone and anything can find themselves a place on Absalom Station, and no matter how far you roam, you're never that far from home. Thank you Starfinders and Pathfinders for taking this look at Absalom Station with me, and Golarion's Lost Moon too. Stepping so far outside our previous wheelhouse has been an interesting change of pace and a fun challenge to tackle. We've got quite a few worlds left to look at as we take more drift lanes to distant worlds, but that's gonna have to be it for now. Thank you so much to all of my supporters, check out the socials and Patreon link below, and until next time, keep your eyes on the stars, and explore, report, and cooperate.